Hello and welcome, Draft League fans. Today we're going over the finals of the most recent seasonal tournament run by Smogon. It's a draft tournament, pretty big, and this is the finals. So we're going to see some high quality game here. I just wanted to look at the matchup real quick before we look into the actual game, see what both players can expect to bring, what can they expect to play against, what are they going to be prepping for specifically. And hopefully you guys can learn a little bit from this. I'm intending this to be a little bit educational, but also if something funny happens, we're going to have a good time. You know what I'm saying? Alright, so first off, there's a Tera Greninja on one side. That's pretty scary, especially when the water resists are Meowscarada and Urshifu. So, in my eyes, there's two things that can happen to prevent this Greninja from absolutely just smoking the entire team. One of them would be a specially defensive water resist Tera on your Dunsparce. Right, that's one option. The other option is just Scarf Meowscarada and try to revenge kill it. Try to limit its turns on the field as much as possible and go from there. You would do that on more of an offensive game plan type thing, whereas, a Spadef Dunsparce would fit more on a more bulky style if you wanted to bring something like that. Now on the other side, what are the biggest threats? Well, obviously that Urshifu Rapid is going to be a massive threat. Reason being, obviously you can threaten it with helmets, but it's most likely going to be protective pads or punching glove in this matchup, as it would be in most matchups. Urshifu Rapid is kind of locked into that item a majority of the time, I've found. So there is that. You need to find some way to knock it off if you want to, use helmets to deal with it. For example, Helmet Blastoise, even a Helmet Okidoki, which doubles as a Meowscarada check, that could be really valuable. Maybe the Okidoki Tera could also be a water resist, just in case, but, that isn't necessarily 100% on that. Urshifu is also pressured to maintain its water resist versus the Greninja and the Blastoise. Even though it doesn't have great Spadef, you do want to be able to take one hit from, for example, a Specs Greninja or a Shell Smash Blastoise, if you can help it. So I'm expecting the Urshifu to, maintain a water resist on its Tera. Whether that's Tera Grass or Tera Water, I'm not 100% sure. Tera Grass would be interesting to give you Tera Blast coverage into the Blastoise, bypassing helmets as well. So there is that as an option. However, Tera Water is also perfectly reasonable. That would allow you to do stuff like 2-hit KO the Okidoki if it's defensive, 2-hit KO Jirachi, 2-hit KO even like a Fat Gouging Fire, which, a Tera Grass variant would not be able to do any of those things. Alright, so Gouging Fire is a pretty big threat. As usual, the possible responses are not really that numerous, right? You can either sack your Klefki to T-Wave it, which doesn't sound the most reliable in the world, or you can use a defensive Donphan, probably Adamant still, because, bulky Gouging Fire with Breaking Swipe is a set that exists, you do want to cover that. So probably the Donphan is going to be forced to take on that role with Earthquake, probably Ice Shard for the Landorus or Ice Spinner, one of those, and then, maybe Rocks, depends on if the Dunsparce wants to carry Rocks or not, and then last move Spin, maybe Roar if you want to get rid of a Booster Energy Gouging Fire, or like Breaking Swipe setting up on you, you can just roar that out, and it's not the end of the world, you can deal with it later. So something like that on the Donphan does feel very forced. Let's see, what else can we look at? The Iron Moth is kind of scary here, right? Just Sludge Wave and, Fire Blast, those two moves, do kind of cover everything for at least neutral damage. So you're going to need something a little bit nicer as a defensive check to it. It could be you're just going to go Greninja and Revenge Kill it, but that doesn't really cover Booster Energy Speed on the Iron Moth, so it's probably going to be something else. Either a very bulky Lando T, or a very bulky Blastoise. These are the two options available for, I believe this is PDK's side with the Greninja. So, one of those things is happening. Either the Lando T is going to be Assault Vest, or the Blastoise is going to be Assault Vest. Or, like, at the very least, Spadef Boots, right? Some kind of defensive set. So, what does that mean? Well, Iron Moth, you could potentially look at something more like long-term, like a Toxic, like Morning Sun kind of set. that does seem pretty potent into a lot of PTK's side. For example, you can Toxic a Gouging Fire, a Blastoise, or a Lando T, and you have switch-ins for them. It's not like you just lose straight up. So the Iron Moth can potentially go for an outlast strategy on these defensive checks. That being said, you can also set up a T-Spike, force the Blastoise to spin, and that gives you a free turn into some offensive threat, maybe Zapdos, maybe something else. But that could also be a game plan. And if Lando T comes in, now you have T-Spikes up. Maybe the Okidoki doesn't come, or if it's already Terra'd, those T-Spikes are going to be devastating. Alright, so I think that's pretty much it for the matchup portion. I've kind of covered all that I really wanted to look at. Key takeaways, right? If the Dudunsparce is not a Water Resist Terra, we know almost for a fact that the Meowscarada is going to be Scarfed to check the Gren. And outside of that, there's not a whole lot you can really tell off of the Terra preview, but we're going to be looking at that. Alright, let's look at the game. There we go, get the dimensions right. So, we see this matchup, and who is benched, right? Let me actually double check. So the Ogerpon, Ampharos, Klefki, and Articuno are benched. I mean, we didn't even talk about the Articuno because it's not a real Pokemon, but yeah, it's about as expected, right? The only thing is, like, maybe you could have used that Ampharos as a Zapdos, like, Giga Check, but you're not really exactly too weak to the Zapdos anyways. I'm not really too concerned about that. So, basically, the 6 that are most, reasonable here makes sense. What is this badge? Top 3 in random battle. This guy might be the GOAT. Anyways, so let's see the Terra preview. This will tell us a little bit about the Meowscarada and the Dudunsparce. Alright, there's a lot of people in the chat. Alright, so it is going to be Terra Water on both of the offensive waters here, which is going to be really important, right? Because this means the Urshifu is going to be able to break through pretty much anything. The defensive Okidoki, for example, that boost on Searching Strikes is going to be pretty impactful. You do see here, it is Ghost on the Dudunsparce. And like we said, this means that this Meowscarada is pretty much guaranteed to be Scarf. Otherwise, he's just going to lose to Greninja from a Battle Bond boost, and that's not something that he's going to just sit there and let happen. So, Scarf Meowscarada. The Urshifu, most likely going to be Punching Glove or Protective Pads. That's like the default for Urshifu Rapids. You should generally go in expecting that and be pleasantly surprised when it's not that set. Zapdos, there's basically no set variety on Zapdos, which is its main weakness in SV. It's basically going to be 4 out of 5 of the moves of Hurricane, Discharge / T-Bolt, Roost, T-Wave, and like maybe U-Turn, maybe Heat Wave. No real reason to run Heat Wave in this matchup though, so most likely going to be one of those other moves. Now Dudunsparce, it is Terra Ghost. What does that tell us about the Dudunsparce? What does Ghost help you check? Well, it's going to be the Okidoki, and not much else. Maybe Spin Block the Blastoise, but it's not like you have like massive spikers or anything, because this Meowscarada, like we said, has to be Scarf. So you're not really spike stacking or anything, so I don't think you really need a spin blocker. So most likely the defensive Terra is just, in case Okidoki starts bulking up and getting out of hand, you do have a option into that thing. Speaking of the Okidoki, that is going to be Terra Ghost as well. What does that tell us? Not really too sure why this would be Terra Ghost. Looking at it, I don't see a big reason to be Terra Ghost. Maybe you want to 1v1 the Dudunsparce itself, avoid like Body Slam paras, maybe? I don't know, it doesn't feel very high value, so I mean the Dudunsparce also doesn't feel very high value, so you're probably just going to see the water types tearing in this game. Probably both sides are planning to do so going into the game as well. So Gouging Fire is going to lead off into the Dudunsparce. We see a booster attack. So this Gouging Fire, we already know just from it leading and being booster attack, is intended to break down the opposing side just through attacking it. Now Dudunsparce leading off, that makes me think that this is probably Stealth Rock. A lot of people like to lead with their rockers, so this would be pretty reasonable. This leads me to believe that the Donphan is going to be more so Spin, EQ, either Spinner or Shard, and Roar. That's going to be the most likely combination here, just because we know that Dudunsparce is leading, and it's most likely going to be Rocks if it is going to be leading. Alright, immediate Heat Crash does just over half, and we reveal Rocky Helmet Body Slam. So this is a physically defensive Dudunsparce. Alright. And we do get the para on the Gouging Fire, which means you now have a free Roost. Scouting, out at this Gouging Fire. If you go for another Heat Crash, it's fine. He's taking Helmet. You're taking a net 2% on the same damage roll. No problem. So basically, you're forcing this Gouging Fire to break through multiple para chances. And I like this Roost. This is a good play. There's a lot of chat going on. Alright. +1, Heat Crash is going to do 75, and we go for a Dragon Tail. I'm not really too sure why we would go for Dragon Tail. I'm expecting Rocks in that 4th slot, and I really think Rocks was the play here. This Gouging Fire is not going to DD twice, and even if it does, it's not the end of the world, right? Because it's going to end up at 46 either way, because of the helmet, the last chip on the Dudunsparce. Even if it does one-shot you at +2, I want those Rocks up, right? But anyways, we missed a Dragon Tail. Honestly, it doesn't feel that impactful. And the reason why is because this Dudunsparce is now at 23. It's in range of everything at this point, so it's basically dead either way. The only difference is maybe you have to revenge kill something else rather than this Gouging Fire. But I think low-key the Gouging Fire being on the field is not a problem. You have plenty of ways to revenge kill it. So now the Urshifu comes out. It does immediately Terra Water and knock out the Gouging Fire. So basically 1-for-1 trade Gouging Fire for the Dudunsparce. That does feel like it favors, this is Wyatt on the other side, going by Booga. I don't really know what exactly to call him. He has like 3 different names on here, the Smogon, and also his Discord username. I'll just call him Wyatt for the purpose of this video. Anyways, Urshifu forces a KO there. There's not really a whole lot that wants to come in on a Terra Water Searching Strike, so just sack the paired Gouging Fire. Makes a whole lot of sense. Now what's going to come in? The Okidoki. Now Okidoki coming in here is a little bit interesting, right? Maybe you would expect a Blastoise, but that being said, Blastoise doesn't really hit it back very hard, so maybe this is reasonable, right? This maybe implies a defensive Okidoki. So what's going to switch in on this Okidoki? You have a few options, right? The Gouging Fire is dead, so you don't really need your Donphan health as badly as you might otherwise. So I would say probably going Donphan here does seem like a very reasonable play. You can also go Zapdos. I think Zapdos is perfectly fair. Spread a T-Wave or something, maybe go for a Hurricane. Something along those sorts, get some nice chip. Because if you look at PDK's team, nothing really wants to come in on Zapdos too comfortably. Maybe the Jirachi can, but you're risking stuff like a Paralyze, like Discharge, for example. Stuff like that. It's not super comfy to switch into Zapdos. So I think in this situation, you can either go Donphan or Zapdos. Donphan because its HP is less valuable because the Gouging Fire is dead, and you can afford to go to it on the Okidoki, no problem. Or Zapdos just to exert some offensive pressure while also, resisting a close combat or something. Maybe absorbing a knockoff. What we see instead, though, is the Urshifu just stays in, goes for a Surging Strikes, does half, which is nice, but knockoff on this protective pads is going to go a long way. Because this Okidoki now reveals max defense with this damage roll. Now what does that mean? It's definitely going to be Rocky Helmet. You're playing into Meowscarada or Urshifu. It's just an automatic on physically defensive mons in that kind of matchup to just put Rocky Helmet on your defensive guys. So you have a few options here as the Urshifu side. You can just click Surging Strikes again. It looks like it should kill on most rolls. You got 17, 18, and 16. So say average that out to 17. It is just going to KO this Okidoki at 49. However, you could potentially be taking 50% in recoil if you do that. So now your Urshifu would be at 24% after the helmets. Probably 25 due to rounding, but still, that might not be a trade worth doing. So now we're going to see a U-turn. Again, I don't really know why the U-turn was clicked. If you're fearing helmet, you should just hard switch. And if you're not fearing helmet, you should just Surging Strikes. This feels like best of neither world. So you take chip and you do no damage, so 4 times resist. Like, okay, and our Zapdos is now poisoned. I would have preferred to see the Zapdos come in the previous turn, but this is still okay, I think. So now you can go for a Hurricane or something. The Lando is going to come in on that, does 53%, which is a lot. We reveal leftovers. So we get some information here. I don't know the exact spreads, but actually we can check. They gave me the pastes. So yeah, they calc max HP, Lando off of no special attack Zapdos. Alright, so now both sides have a little bit more information on the opposing sets. Now we know Lando is faster this turn, which is kind of important now because this Toxic is going to put it in Rock Slide range, so this Zapdos is either forced out or it's just going to have to be sacked here. So we're going to go Donphan, which is pretty nice on the Rock Slide. We break our Sturdy, unfortunately, but if we have Ice Shard, this makes sense, and we do have Ice Shard. This feels like maybe you could have saved the Lando as a sack fodder and gone into one of your water types here. I think an ice move was all but guaranteed in that situation, so I would have preferred to see either a Blastoise or a Greninja pivot on that specific turn, maybe maintain the sack fodder, because if you look at something like the Urshifu, it is pretty scary. You don't really want to be switching it on that if you don't have to. If you can save a sack fodder, that does seem pretty valuable in this specific situation. But either way, just gonna sack, take the safe play, go to Greninja, and now you get your Terra Water Surf off. And that's gonna KO the Zapdos on the sack, you get your Battle Bond, yeah, Terra Water. At this point, Wyatt is probably thinking this is Specs, judging from no Life Orb recoil, and you know, there's no water resist really on the team. I think the two water resists are frail, so Specs would make a whole lot of sense here. So that's probably what he's expecting here. You go Meowscarada, screaming, hey, I'm Choice Scarf, you should scout this. And PTK gives him the respect, goes hard into the Okie Dokie, but a U-turn is clicked, so more Helmet Chip getting spread onto the Meowscarada. Now Donphan comes in, it's a pretty free Earthquake, there's no ground resist, and yeah, this is Adamant Donphan, so that's going to do so much damage. However, crucially, it's not going to be putting it in Ice Shard range, so this is a pretty nice offensive positioning move from PTK, using the HP on his Greninja to get another forced KO, basically. Because nothing wants to come in on this Surf. Like, what's he gonna do? Go hard Meowscarada? That feels very risky on a potential Ice Beam. Like, I don't know. I mean, Ice Beam is kind of a silly play as well. It's probably just gonna be Surf. But Meowscarada taking a Surf might just put it in helmet range, I'm not even joking, if this is Specs like Wyatt is expecting. So probably just gonna see a sack here. The Urshifu is gonna be basically sacked here, although maybe this does threaten Aqua Jet. So this could be actually a pretty nice resource that he's found, using the HP on Urshifu to threaten a Aqua Jet. Now, do you click Aqua Jet? There's a revealed helmet in the back, so most likely PTK is just looking to KO this Urshifu through helmet here. So probably he's going to expect the Okie Dokie to come in. I think Aqua Jet would be a wrong click here. You want to take advantage of this turn, and he does go for the close combat into Jirachi, which also reveals to be helmet. Now, let's see, what does that reveal? We can just check. So we now reveal that this is max HP on the Jirachi, so both sides are now aware of this. And what's going to happen here? Rocks go up as a close combat comes out. So this is kind of a like checkmate position for the Urshifu, where if you switch out, you're dead to rocks, and if you stay in, you're dead to helmet. The only way to prevent that would be to spin, in which case you're setting up rocks for a spin turn. That's a 1-for-1 trade in terms of like your Pokemon moving, so it's not the end of the world for PTK. I do like that play. The Jirachi wasn't doing anything either way. It loses to the other three, so this is a nice resource. Those rocks up are going to be pretty nice. You know, Meowscarada comes in, Blastoise in, and U-turn does 33, so we're not interested in Flower Tricking. And now Flip Turn on the Moth. I really think a Flower Trick was in order there. The only reason you wouldn't Flower Trick, I guess, is if you were expecting Okie Dokie to come in. But even then, that chip is going to add up. Because Flower Trick is like Loki going to 3-hit KO Okie Dokie, which means if it takes a Flower Trick, it's not going to be able to take another one. And you still have your Donphan at 91 HP, so you have a switch into the Okie Dokie. I guess the threat would be Flower Trick into the Okie Dokie, and then Okidoki uses that as a double opportunity into the Greninja onto the Donphan. And that would be potentially game winning. So maybe he wants to avoid that situation by going for a U-turn on the Okidoki, but you're not really making progress on that. You're switching on rocks and you're taking Helmet. Even if the play works out how Wyatt expected it to, which if you're going for a U-turn, I think he had to be expecting the Okidoki to come in, right? I don't think it was worth it. And either way, now you have to switch in on Blastoise, and it's going to go for a flip turn on the Iron Moth switch in. Probably expecting an Ice Beam, just in case the Flower Trick didn't KO. So that's why he went Moth, but does not work out obviously as Flip Turn comes out, and Gren gets a free switch in. And Water Shuriken to cover like a Scarf Moth. Very intelligent there. Now Meowscarada comes in, but now we have the Okidoki resource. And another U-turn clicked. We're taking rocks and Helmet just over and over. And now this Meowscarada, despite not really being hit by anything, is now at 43%. After rocks, that's going to be 31. I mean, that's pretty close to a Water Shuriken range, right? So it does look pretty cooked at this point. Donphan comes in, but we can just go Blastoise. It's not the end of the world. And now, I mean, we go for Earthquake. This kind of reveals that there's no Surf or anything on this Blastoise. It's Mono Flip Turn as the water move, so he's just trying to sack it. This is correct. Even after a Rapid Spin, this is not going to be out of Gren like range. It's not going to outspeed Gren. Ice Shard, not going to KO, so he has to go to Meow and just hope it lives, but obviously it doesn't. This is a, you know, Terra Water Gren. Now Ice Shard doesn't knock it out, and the Donphan does go down. And the crowd goes wild. You see this? Oh my god. Yap, yap, yap. So, what were some of the major mistakes from Wyatt's side? Why did it end up being, you know, a pretty simple endgame, all things considered, for PDK? It didn't feel like he was in danger of losing at any particular point. So what went wrong, right? Losing the pads on Urshifu, I think, was a really big deal. Not only do you like lose a bunch of HP through helmets in later turns, I mean, yeah, you just trade for chip on Okidoki, which I think at the end of the day probably wasn't worth it when you had something like a Zapdos or a Donphan to come in. I think that was like the main mistake, and then from that it kind of spiraled. Missing the Dragon Tail I think definitely didn't matter on like turn 3 or whatever. Not getting rocks maybe sucked a little bit. Like, imagine rocks being up, this Gren wouldn't be able to have as many turns on the field as it did. The Okidoki, even though it's only getting chipped 6% each time, that will add up, right? Especially if you're like U-turning a bunch of times with Meowscarada. When you're just like switching around with U-turns and stuff with a rock's disadvantage, I mean, it's not going to go well for you, as that's exactly what we saw. U-turning on helmets with rocks up, this Meowscarada basically self-KO'd. It got put in range of Surf just by clicking U-turn 3 times. So that was a little bit, you know, maybe unideal. But yeah, I definitely think there was room for a Flower Trick endgame if this Meowscarada was maybe a little bit healthier. Maybe this Okidoki was able to take a little bit more chip, maybe Flower Tricking, and instead of U-turning, would basically double the chip on Okidoki, getting rocks up, and then, you know, using your Donphan Zapdos defensive resources a little bit more wisely against this Okidoki. But that's pretty much it for me. Congratulations to PDK for taking this seasonal, you know, the championship victory, all that stuff. Well played from him, obviously. This prep was pretty nice. Double helmet for the Urshifu. Like we said, if you're able to knock it, you really do reduce the value quite a lot, and he was able to do that. Whether that's a mistake from Wyatt's end or not, you know, PDK did play quite well enough to win, so congrats to him. Hope to see him in DCL. That's coming up very soon. And yeah, that's going to be it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.